He was the CEO's son who couldn't tell PowerPoint from a payroll sheet. But that day, during the most critical presentation to the board and investors, he casually replaced my slides, slide 17, specifically, and he didn't know I'd left something he couldn't remove, something that would make him bow his head before the entire boardroom. My name is Claire Donovan, and at 32, I'd become the invisible architect of SablePoint Dynamics' biggest wins. Senior Strategy Specialist, that was my official title at this Denver tech consulting firm, though it hardly captured the reality of my role. While others stood at podiums delivering presentations to Fortune 500 clients, I sat hunched over my laptop until 3 a.m., crafting every slide, every data point, every compelling narrative that sealed multi-million-dollar deals. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. My PowerPoints had generated over $40 million in revenue last year alone, yet my name appeared nowhere on the final reports. Not in the email chains to clients, not in the company newsletter celebrating our victories. I was the ghostwriter of corporate success, perpetually standing in shadows cast by those with the right last names and golf club memberships. I'd accepted this arrangement for 5 years, told myself it was strategic patience, that recognition would come eventually. My manager, Patricia, occasionally threw me bones. Claire's input was valuable, buried in paragraph 3 of her quarterly reviews. But when promotion season arrived, it was always someone else's turn. Someone who presented better, someone who had leadership presence, someone whose father knew someone. Then Tyler Bain arrived. Fresh from his MBA program, one of those executive fast tracks designed for rich kids to network rather than learn, Tyler strutted into our offices last September, wearing a Tom Ford suit that cost more than my monthly rent. The CEO's son had been appointed Head of Innovation, a title created specifically for him. The announcement email praised his fresh perspective and dynamic vision for SablePoint's future. I watched him during his first week, fumbling with basic Excel functions, asking interns to explain what KPIs meant, scheduling meetings he'd forget to attend. He once asked me, completely serious, if we could make the data more exciting by adding what he called those moving picture things, he meant GIFs, in a board presentation. But what grated most wasn't his incompetence. It was his casual appropriation of others' work. He'd drop into meetings, listen for 5 minutes, then later claim he'd guided the strategic direction. He'd forward emails with a single agreed, and suddenly he'd led the correspondence. Patricia and the other managers enabled it, laughing at his jokes, praising his initiative. I remained professional, smiled when he interrupted my presentations to add pointless commentary, nodded when he publicly questioned analyses he couldn't understand, even helped him prepare for client calls, knowing he'd take credit for my coaching. The breaking point was approaching, though I didn't know it yet. In early March, whispers started circulating about Everbridge Capital. The investment firm was shopping for a tech consulting partner, potentially bringing $50 million in funding and access to their portfolio companies. It would be the deal of the decade for SablePoint. Patricia pulled me aside one morning. "Claire, I need you to handle something confidential," she said, closing her office door. "The Everbridge presentation, it needs to be perfect, absolutely perfect." I nodded, already mentally cataloging the research I'd need to compile. "Tyler will be leading the presentation. Of course," she added, not meeting my eyes. "The CEO wants to showcase our next generation of leadership, but you'll build the deck, like always." The words stung, but I maintained my composure. "Of course. When's the presentation?" 3 weeks, March 28th, 2 p.m. sharp. 3 weeks to create a presentation that could transform SablePoint's trajectory. 3 weeks to build something brilliant that Tyler Bain would stumble through while I sat silently in the back row, if I was invited at all. That night, I stayed until midnight, mapping out the presentation structure, 25 slides of meticulously crafted strategy. I even began working on what would become the infamous Slide 17, a sophisticated analysis of human capital risks and mitigation strategies. It was the kind of insight that separated serious firms from pretenders, the kind of analysis that would make Everbridge's partners lean forward in their chairs. I perfected every transition, every data visualization, every turn of phrase. This would be my masterpiece, even if no one would know it was mine. How naive I was. thinking Tyler would simply deliver my work unchanged. I underestimated both his arrogance and his ignorance. He wouldn't just steal my presentation, he'd butcher it, convinced he was improving it. And that would be his downfall. The next 3 weeks blurred into a marathon of 18-hour days. I transformed my cubicle into a war room, surrounding myself with industry reports, competitor analyses, and financial projections. Every morning, I arrived at 6:30 a.m., 2 full hours before anyone else, savoring the quiet office as I refined each element of the presentation. The Everbridge opportunity wasn't just another pitch, it was a potential lifeline for Sablepoint. Our revenue had plateaued, and whispers of layoffs haunted the break room conversations. This investment could secure everyone's future, and I felt that responsibility with every slide I crafted. I started with market analysis, building a narrative that positioned Sablepoint as the essential bridge between Everbridge's portfolio companies and emerging technologies. Slide by slide, I wove data into story, statistics into strategy. Each chart was precisely calibrated, complex enough to show sophistication, clear enough to grasp instantly. But slide 17 became my obsession. The HR risk assessment slide addressed what I knew would be Everbridge's primary concern: talent retention in tech consulting. I'd overheard their partners at a conference expressing skepticism about firms with high turnover. So I created something revolutionary, a predictive model showing how Sablepoint's unique culture and compensation structure yielded 70% lower attrition than industry standards. The slide featured an elegant waterfall chart transitioning into a heat map, demonstrating not just where we excelled, but why. I incorporated proprietary data from exit interviews I'd been collecting for 2 years, patterns no one else had bothered to analyze. The insights were gold, showing how our project rotation system prevented burnout, how our mentorship program created loyalty, how our flexible work arrangements attracted top talent. I even built in interactive elements, allowing the presenter to drill down into specific departments or time periods. It was the kind of analysis that transformed a standard pitch into a strategic partnership discussion. Patricia checked in periodically, her eyes widening as she clicked through my progress. "This is exceptional, Claire, really exceptional." But she never suggested I should present it myself. That conversation was as closed as the executive floor was to someone like me. Tyler stopped by my desk the week before the presentation, Cologne announcing his arrival before he appeared. "Hey, Clara." "Claire." "Right, Claire, how's my presentation coming along?" "My presentation," I forced a smile. "It's on track. Would you like to review it together? I could walk you through the key points, especially the technical sections." He waved dismissively. "Nah, I'll look it over the night before. I'm more of an intuitive presenter. Like to keep things fresh, spontaneous." Spontaneous, with $50 million at stake. "I really think we should rehearse," I pressed. "Especially slide 17. The human capital analysis has multiple layers." "Don't worry about it," he interrupted, already checking his phone. "I've got this. Presentations are kind of my thing. B-school, After he left, I stared at slide 17 for a long moment. Then, making a decision I didn't fully understand yet, I added something extra, buried in the slide's metadata, invisible during presentation mode but embedded in the file properties. I inserted comprehensive documentation creation timestamps, revision history, even my digital signature, a small insurance policy, though I wasn't sure why I felt I needed one. The day before the presentation, I worked until 11 p.m., polishing every transition, double-checking every number. I created 3 versions: the master file, a backup, and what I called the safety version on my personal drive. Something in my gut warned me to protect this work. I sent the final version to Tyler and Patricia at 11:47 p.m., with detailed presenter notes for each slide. The email took me 30 minutes to write, professional but thorough, outlining key talking points and potential questions from Everbridge. Tyler replied at 12:15 a.m. "Got it, THX. 3 weeks of work, hundreds of hours. The company's future potentially hanging in the balance." And his response was THX. I should have known then. Should have realized that someone who couldn't even spell out thanks wouldn't respect the intellectual property he'd been handed. But I went home that night feeling accomplished, even proud. I'd created something brilliant. Tomorrow, even if Tyler stammered through the delivery, the content would shine through. I believed that excellence spoke for itself, that good work couldn't be diminished by bad presentation. I was wrong. The morning of March 28th arrived gray and drizzling, fitting weather for what would become my professional awakening. I arrived at 7 a.m., planning to do a final review of the presentation setup in the boardroom. What I found instead made my blood run cold. Tyler was already there, hunched over the conference room computer with someone from IT. My presentation blazed across the screen, but it was wrong, all wrong. The sophisticated navy and silver color scheme I'd chosen Everbridge's brand colors. A subtle psychological alignment had been replaced with garish orange and electric blue. Slide titles now featured a cartoonish font that looked like it belonged on a children's birthday invitation. Data visualizations I'd spent hours perfecting were replaced with basic pie charts and actual clip art of business people shaking hands. Tyler. My voice came out strangled. He spun around, grinning. Claire, great timing. I'm just adding some pizzazz to your slides. They were a bit boring. Too corporate. Too corporate. For a corporate investment firm. I think we should discuss. Oh, and check this out. He clicked to slide 17, and my heart stopped. My beautiful, complex human capital analysis was gone. In its place sat a stock photo of diverse professionals laughing around a conference table, overlaid with a Gandhi quote, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Nothing else. No data, no analysis, no insights that had taken me 40 hours to compile. Tyler, that slide contained critical information about retention rates and... Yeah, it was way too complicated, he interrupted, waving his hand. Nobody wants to see all those numbers. This is much more impactful. Shows we care about people, I stood frozen, watching him systematically destroy 3 weeks of strategic brilliance, but the worst was yet to come. He pulled up the title slide, and where it had once read, Strategic Partnership Proposal Sablepoint Dynamics and Everbridge Capital, it now said, presented by Tyler Bain, Head of Innovation. No mention of team, no acknowledgement of contribution, not even the corporate we. The executives want to see leadership, he explained, misreading my expression. This shows I'm taking ownership. Ownership of my work, my insights, my analysis. Tyler, I really must insist. Relax, Claire. He stood, straightening his tie. I know you're nervous about your first big presentation being shown to Everbridge, but trust me, I've got this. My dad said the partners are old school, they want vision, not spreadsheets. Your first big presentation, as if I hadn't been creating these for 5 years, as if this was some favor he was doing for me. Patricia entered the boardroom at 8:30, took one look at the screen, and her face went pale. Tyler, what happened to the original design? I enhanced it, he said proudly, made it more dynamic. She turned to me, a silent question in her eyes. I could have fought then, could have insisted on reverting to the original, but I saw the calculation in her expression. The CEO's son had made changes, and challenging him meant challenging the CEO himself. Claire, could you... She gestured vaguely. Make sure we have printed copies. Of which version? I asked quietly. Tyler's version, of course. Tyler answered for her. I nodded, my decision crystallizing. I'll prepare the handouts, and I'll make sure to keep the original version, for our records. Something in my tone made Patricia look at me sharply, but she said nothing. I spent the next hour in my cubicle, mechanically printing Tyler's bastardized presentation while secretly uploading my original to 3 different cloud services. I documented everything: screenshots of the original versus the modified version, email timestamps, file properties showing creation and modification histories. At 1 p.m., I watched the Everbridge team arrive. 3 partners, 2 associates, all in understated suits that whispered old money and careful decisions. They had the sharp-eyed look of people who'd built fortunes by seeing through facades. Tyler glad-handed them in the lobby, his nervous energy palpable even from across the floor. He kept touching his hair, adjusting his collar, laughing too loudly at their polite remarks. As they filed into the boardroom, I made a decision. I wasn't invited to the meeting, Tyler had made that clear, but I positioned myself in the adjacent conference room. Through the glass wall, I could watch the disaster unfold. I opened my laptop and pulled up my original slide 17. Staring at what should have been, then I opened a new document and began typing. If this presentation failed, I wanted a record of exactly why. At 1:55 p.m., I watched Tyler take his position at the head of the table, my butchered presentation glowing behind him. He clicked to the title slide, presented by Tyler Bain, and smiled. He had no idea what was coming. The first 15 slides went exactly as I'd predicted. Tyler strutted through my simplified market analysis, butchering the terminology but saved by the dumbed-down charts he'd inserted. The Everbridge partners maintained poker faces, occasionally jotting notes. Professional courtesy kept them from revealing their thoughts, though I caught one associate suppressing a wince when Tyler called blockchain the chain of blocks technology. CEO Richard Bain sat at the far end, beaming at his son with paternal pride. Patricia fidgeted with her pen, eyes darting between the screen and the partners' expressions. The other Sablepoint executives, CFO, CTO, head of sales wore the forced smiles of people watching a slow-motion car crash they couldn't prevent. Then came slide 16, and I saw it happen. The lead partner, a silver-haired woman named Margaret Chen, leaned forward slightly. Her question cut through Tyler's rambling like a scalpel. Mr. Bain, before we proceed, could you address the human capital risk factor? With the tech talent shortage, we need to understand your retention strategies and workforce stability metrics. Tyler clicked to slide 17. Gandhi smiled serenely from the stock photo. The room went silent. Well, Tyler began, his confidence evaporating. As you can see, we believe in change, being the change. That's our philosophy on human capital. Margaret Chen's expression didn't shift, but her pen stopped moving. I was hoping for something more. Quantitative. Turnover rates, retention costs, competitive positioning. Tyler's hand hovered over the clicker. Those are excellent questions. We focus more on the qualitative aspects, the human element. The human element, she repeated flatly. Mr. Bain, do you have actual data on employee retention? I watched Tyler's neck flush red above his collar. Of course, it's... Patricia, do you have those numbers? Patricia looked like she'd swallowed glass. Tyler, I believe that information was supposed to be in the presentation. Right, yes. He clicked forward, then back, as if data might magically appear. We maintain industry-standard retention rates. Which are... The question came from another partner, a younger man who'd been silent until now. Approximately, Patricia. Our turnover is 18% annually, Patricia supplied quietly. Margaret Chen made a note. The industry average for tech consulting is 22%. You're claiming to beat that, but without supporting data. More concerningly, you seem unaware of your own metrics. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Richard Bain's smile had fossilized on his face. Perhaps, Margaret continued, you could walk us through your workforce planning model. How do you project talent needs against client demands? Tyler stood frozen, a deer caught in halogen headlights. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. We use a very sophisticated model. Very sophisticated. Excellent. Please elaborate. The silence stretched. 5 seconds, 10, 15. I think what Tyler means, Richard Bain finally interjected, is that we take a holistic approach. With respect, Mr. Bain, Margaret cut him off. I'm interested in hearing from your head of innovation. This is fundamental to any investment decision. If Sablepoint can't retain talent, you can't deliver on client commitments. It's that simple. Tyler attempted to recover. We have multiple initiatives, mentorship programs, flexible work arrangements. We're very innovative in this space. Specific metrics, please. ROI on these programs. Correlation with retention rates. Cost per employee retained versus replacement costs. Each question was a nail in the coffin of Tyler's charade. He looked desperately at the screen, at his father, at Patricia. But Gandhi offered no wisdom for this moment. I don't have those specific numbers in front of me, he finally admitted. Then perhaps you could share your predictive model, how you forecast attrition risk by department or project type. We're actually developing that model currently. Margaret Chen closed her portfolio. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Mr. Bain, she said quietly. Everbridge manages $2 billion in assets. We don't make $50 million investments based on Gandhi quotes and promises of future models. You've presented for 30 minutes without a single meaningful metric on one of the most critical operational factors. She stood, and her team followed suit. This has been instructive. We'll be in touch. The way she said instructive made it clear they wouldn't be. As they filed out, I heard the younger partner murmur to his colleague, 18% turnover is actually good. If only they'd had the data to prove it. Through the glass, I watched the aftermath. Richard Bain's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. Patricia stared at the table. Tyler stood slack-jawed, still gripping the clicker like a life preserver. The stock market agreed with Margaret Chen's assessment. By 4 p.m, whispers of the failed Everbridge meeting had leaked. Sablepoint stock dropped 12% in after-hours trading. Financial blogs speculated about leadership competence. One particularly brutal headline read, Sablepoint fails to solve for X in basic equation. I saved that article, right next to my original slide 17, with its beautiful data and proven insights. The data that would have saved them all. That evening, while Sablepoint's executives held emergency damage control meetings, I sat in a wine bar downtown, staring at my phone. The contact I needed was already in my list, Tessa Reeves, Everbridge Capital's Director of Strategic Investments. We'd met 6 months ago at the Women in Tech Finance Summit, bonding over our shared frustration with performative leadership in the industry. I'd helped her understand a complex derivatives model during a workshop break. She'd given me her card, saying, smart people should know other smart people. I'd never imagined I'd use it like this. My thumb hovered over her name. This wasn't about revenge, or maybe it was, but a cleaner kind. This was about truth. I typed carefully. Hi Tessa, I hope you remember me from the Denver Summit. I heard Everbridge met with my company today. I have some insights that might interest you regarding the human capital analysis you requested. Would you be open to coffee tomorrow? Her response came within minutes. Claire, of course I remember. I heard about today's meeting. How's 9 a.m. at Novo? Simple, direct, no questions about propriety or protocol, just one professional to another. That night, I prepared meticulously. I printed my original presentation, complete with timestamps and metadata. I compiled the email chains showing my sole authorship. Most importantly, I refined slide 17 into a standalone analysis, 6 pages of insights that demonstrated not just Sablepoint's potential, but my own capabilities. I didn't sleep. Instead, I researched Everbridge's portfolio companies, identifying 3 that desperately needed the kind of talent optimization strategies I'd developed. By dawn, I had a subtle proposal, not just data about Sablepoint, but a vision for how workforce analytics could transform their entire investment approach. Novo Coffee buzzed with the usual morning crowd, but Tessa had secured a quiet corner table. She looked exactly as I remembered: sharp blazer, minimal jewelry, eyes that missed nothing. Claire, she stood to shake my hand. After yesterday's disaster, I'm curious what brings you here. I placed my folder on the table. I believe you asked for data yesterday. You didn't receive it. Her eyebrow arched. That's one way to put it. Tyler Bain seemed to think Gandhi quotes were sufficient DD material. What if I told you the real analysis exists, that every metric Margaret requested was not only prepared, but goes deeper than what you typically see? I slid the original slide 17 across the table. Tessa's expression shifted as she absorbed the waterfall chart, the predictive modeling, the departmental heat maps. This is... She looked up sharply. Who created this? Check the metadata. She pulled out her phone, scanning the file properties. Her eyes widened slightly at the creation date, the author name, the revision history spanning 3 weeks. You built this entire presentation. Every slide, every analysis, every insight. I kept my voice neutral, professional. Tyler Bain modified it the morning of your meeting. He felt data was too complicated for your team. Tessa laughed, a short, sharp sound. Margaret Chen has a PhD in quantitative finance. She finds most data too simple. I'm not here to disparage anyone, I said carefully, but I believe Everbridge makes decisions based on complete information. You asked about human capital risks. The real answer isn't just SablePoint's 18% turnover rate. It's understanding why our consulting teams have 60% lower attrition than competitors, how our project rotation reduces burnout by 40%, and why our mentorship program has an ROI of 320%. Tessa leaned back, studying me. You're not just offering data, you're offering yourself. I'm offering truth. What you do with it is your decision. She was quiet for a long moment, then pulled out her laptop. Show me more. Not just this slide, show me how you think. For the next hour, I walked her through my analytical process, how I'd identified patterns in exit interview data that others missed, how I'd correlated project types with burnout rates, creating a predictive model for team assignments, how I'd quantified the previously unquantifiable the real cost of losing institutional knowledge. This is dissertation-level work, Tessa said finally, and Tyler Bain replaced it with a Gandhi quote. Everyone makes choices, I replied. She smiled, then a real smile, not the polished professional version. Yes, they do, and I'm about to make one. Margaret will want to see this, not just the slide, all of it. Are you prepared for that? I thought of 5 years in the shadows, of Patricia's apologetic shrugs, of Tyler's casual theft and careless destruction, of Richard Bain's nepotism masquerading as leadership development. I'm prepared. Tessa gathered the papers. One question: why didn't you fight to keep your original version in the presentation? I met her gaze directly. Because sometimes the best way to prove value isn't to argue for it, it's to let its absence speak for itself. She nodded slowly. 12% stock drop in one afternoon. That's quite a voice. As we prepared to leave, she paused. Claire, what you're doing, some would call it betrayal. And others would call it the free market of talent and ideas, I responded. Everbridge asked for expertise. SablePoint chose not to provide it. I'm simply correcting that market inefficiency. Tessa extended her hand. I'll call you by end of day. Walking back to my car, I felt something shift. Not guilt I'd moved past that the moment Tyler erased 40 hours of my work, not anger that had crystallized into something more useful. What I felt was clarity, the kind that comes from finally playing your cards instead of just holding them. My phone buzzed, a text from Patricia. Emergency all hands at 2 p.m., mandatory attendance. I smiled, imagining their panic, their scrambling, their sudden need for the expertise they'd so casually dismissed. But I had a different meeting to prepare for now. The call from Tessa came at 4:30 p.m., just as SablePoint's all-hands meeting was dissolving into bitter recriminations. I'd attended, sitting in the back row, watching Richard Bain attempt to spin the disaster as a learning opportunity, while the staff exchanged knowing glances. Claire, Tessa's voice was bright with possibility. Margaret wants to meet, not about SablePoint, about you, tomorrow, 10 a.m., Everbridge offices. Can you make it? Yes. Simple. Certain. Bring everything, not just the presentation, bring examples of your other work. And Claire, wear your best power suit. That night, I assembled my portfolio. 5 years of invisible excellence suddenly made visible. The healthcare sector analysis that landed a $10 million contract. The competitive intelligence report that stopped a hostile takeover. The workforce optimization model that saved a client $3 million annually. Each project bore someone else's name on the cover sheet. Tomorrow, I'd reclaim them all. The Everbridge offices occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown high-rise, all glass and steel and quiet power. Margaret Chen met me personally in the lobby, a gesture whose significance wasn't lost on me. Ms. Donovan, her handshake was firm, her assessment immediate. Tessa showed me your work. I have questions. In the conference room, 3 other partners waited. I recognized them from yesterday's disaster, but their expressions had shifted from dismissive to intrigued. First question. Margaret began without preamble. Why didn't you present yesterday? I wasn't invited. Tyler Bain was designated as the presenter. Despite creating the entire presentation, that's been my role at SablePoint. I create, others present. Margaret exchanged glances with her colleagues. Show us what Tyler destroyed. For the next 90 minutes, I presented my original work, not just reciting teaching. I showed them the thinking behind each analysis, the data sources, the predictive algorithms. When I reached slide 17, I went deeper, demonstrating how the model could be applied across their portfolio. This attrition prediction model, one partner interrupted, could this identify problem companies before they implode? With 87% accuracy based on backtesting, I confirmed, pulling up additional analysis I'd prepared. I've run it against 50 tech failures from the last decade. It would have flagged 44 of them at least 6 months before collapse. The room became electric. Questions flew sharp, technical, probing. These weren't people who could be fooled by Gandhi quotes. They wanted formulas, methodologies, validation techniques. I gave them everything. Finally, Margaret raised a hand for silence. Ms. Donovan, I'm going to be direct. We're not interested in Sablepoint anymore. We're interested in you. My heart hammered, but I kept my voice steady. In what capacity? We're launching a new initiative, Everbridge Analytics, a subsidiary focused on workforce intelligence for our portfolio companies. We need someone to build and lead it, someone who understands both the technical and human sides of talent optimization. She slid a folder across the table. This is our offer: base salary, equity stake, team of 12 to start, reporting directly to me. You'd have full autonomy to build the practice. I opened the folder. The number at the top made my vision blur momentarily. It was more than triple my Sablepoint salary. There's one condition, Margaret continued. We need you to start immediately, Monday. We have 3 portfolio companies in crisis, and they need your expertise. What about my non-compete? Margaret's smile was sharp. We have excellent lawyers. Besides, you won't be competing with Sablepoint. You'll be operating at a level they can't